Good morning to you all.
Yes.
It gives me great pleasure to be part of this interactive session conducted by the RCSH institution. So I must first of all appreciate the steps taken by the respected principal, Shri Mustafa, and all the coordinators of these clubs which are there as part of the college. And Hamid Ali sir, it's nice to see you again after such a long time. And it gives me great pleasure to be a part of this particular session. My apologies for not knowing Malayalam, so I'll only be talking in English. And I'm aware that the students will be from a varied backgrounds. So I will just be highlighting certain issues and not going into depths of the scientific part of it, so that we give an overview to all the students. They just learn to appreciate what exactly is the significance of this day. Now, June 5th is celebrated the world over as the World Environment Day. The origin of this particular day was because of a meeting which took place in Stockholm, Sweden in 1972. It was part of the United Nations Conference on Human and Environment. And from 1974 onwards, this day has been marked to solemnize that event which took place in 1972. It was the Stockholm Summit was a landmark meeting in which the world leaders first focused their attention on environmental issues. Prior to that, the meetings would only be political, trade, and all other matters, but never focus on environment. Now, the aim of this particular day is to increase people's awareness on the importance of environment and also to promote good practices to generate positive impact on our environment. So this is the main reason for which this day is marked. And again, I specifically tell this that this is not a very joyous day. It is a day in which we need to reflect and focus our energies towards creating better conditions for the environment. Unlike other days where we actually celebrate, this is not a day of celebration. It is a day of reflection in which we focus our attention towards all the problems that we as humans are causing to the environment and ways to mitigate that, because we must remember that there is only one earth which is available on which we all live, and we have no other place to go to. So we have to conserve, preserve whatever is available, the natural resources, and use it as judiciously and as carefully as possible to ensure that it is available for the future generations. Now, from 1987 onwards, there is a concept of a host country and a theme. Now, for the year 2021, the host country is Pakistan, and the theme they have chosen is ecosystem restoration, which is the reason why today's topic is focused on the ecosystem restoration and specifically to the mountain ecosystem restoration. Now, there are a huge number of ecosystems available in the world. And we generally tend to focus on the ones which are of greater importance. Now, two systems are shortlisted for that. One is the mountain ecosystem and other is the marine ecosystem. Both of them are biodiversity rich areas. There are other ecosystems too, like coastal areas, desert, all other types of ecosystems, but they are slightly on a smaller scale when we compare to the mountain ecosystem and the marine ecosystem. Now, today we are focusing basically on the mountain ecosystem. Now, a mountain is defined as any place of elevation of beyond 5,000 feet. So anything less than 5,000 feet is called a hill, and beyond 5,000 feet, we call it as a mountain. Now, if we take the global scene, then mountain ecosystem covers 4% of the total land surface of the earth. And 1.2 billion people are dependent on the mountain ecosystem, as well as on the edges of these mountains. And 1/2 of the mankind, that is 50% of the mankind, is dependent on the mountain resources. And this harbors 25% of the land biodiversity. Like I mentioned earlier, there is one more important ecosystem called the marine ecosystem, which harbors another 30% of the total biodiversity, whereas 25% of the land biodiversity is found in the mountains. And 50% of the biodiversity hotspots are found in the mountains. Now, for those who are not aware of what is meant by a biodiversity hotspot, a biodiversity hotspot is defined as a location, geographical location, which should have at least 1,500 species of plants which are endemic. Endemic means which occur only in that particular area. And this area should have lost more than 75% of its original vegetation. That means it is under severe threat. The original vegetation, more than 75% is lost. And in this criteria, 36 hotspots have been identified in the world, of which 6 are found in India. Of the 6 which are found in India are, one is the Himalayan region, other is the Indo-Burma region, which covers the northeast area. Then you have Sunda land, which extends up to Thailand and beyond, but it covers Nicobar Islands for India. Then we have Sundarbans, which stretches from India to Bangladesh. Then we have the Terai region. Terai region is the foothills of the Himalayan region, which is the Indo-Gangetic Plain region. And then we have the most important, the Western Ghats. So these are the 6 biodiversity hotspots. Now, why we need to focus on the mountain ecosystem? Because mountain ecosystems are the major source for timber and fuel wood. And also large portion of agriculture is dependent there. And the most vital role of all the mountain ecosystems is it is the major source of the rivers of the peninsular India, particularly if we take the Western Ghats. Not only the Western Ghats, the world over, the mountains are the source for all the rivers. So river systems originate from the mountains and then flow down to the plains. So which means we have an irrigation, drinking water source, which is in the hills. Then also hydroelectric power generation happens because of this. And mountain regions are also source of genetic resources, and which means biochemical and natural medicines are also found there. And the vital role, particularly which is being attributed and focused, is its role in holding the water. Mountains are the places where a bulk of rainfall occurs because of its nature. It offers a wide surface area, so large volume of water is trapped here, and the vegetation which is available in the mountain holds this water and allows a gradual runoff down in the form of streams and rivers. If mountains were not there, this heavy rainfall would have come down as a rapid runoff. When it rains, we get what is called as a runoff. But mountains help hold this water as sponge. So they are basically the overhead tanks of the world. They hold the water and then gradually allow the release of water for the remaining several months. These are the direct tangible benefits. We also have what are called as intangible benefits. Its role in climate amelioration, oxygen supply, then recreation. Most people go to hill stations for recreation needs. Then these are places where there are large number of protected areas. So there is a good wildlife presence here. Now, these are the benefits of mountain ecosystem. Now, what are the threats that mountain ecosystems face? Being the very nature of, because having steep slopes, these areas are ecologically very sensitive and are very prone to erosion, landslips. And any type of huge human presence or human activity endangers the land here more than in the plains. So this is the reason why the mountain ecosystem is always a focused and a threatened and a fragile ecosystem. This I told about in general about mountain ecosystem. But if I come down specifically now to the Western Ghats, this is, as I mentioned, one of the 6 biodiversity hotspots of the world. It has more than 5,000 flowering plants available here. 139 mammal species are available, 508 bird species, and 139 species of amphibians. For those who read the papers, almost regularly we get new discoveries of species, and most of these would be focused in the Western Ghats only. Now, a lot of species are yet to be identified and discovered. And 325 of the globally threatened species are found in the Western Ghats. And as in the inaugural, the welcome session, they informed, it stretches right from Kanyakumari to Gujarat. In between are the high ranges, and this length stretches to 1,600 kilometers, covering an area of 1.6 lakh square kilometers, and 30% of it is in the forest cover. It receives a mix of rainfall, right from 70 centimeters to 200 centimeters. Elevation ranges from 500 meters to 2,000, almost 700 meters. Anemudi is 2,678 meters. And it is the origin of major rivers, Kaveri, Godavari, and Krishna. The three major rivers of peninsular India originate from the Western Ghats, irrigating large tracts in several states. Now, what are the threats that this region faces? The main threat to this region is coming from huge anthropogenic activities. Anthropogenic activities means activities of in which humans are responsible. Now, these are basically mining. Mining is a major concern because a lot of iron ore and bauxite is found in the Western Ghats. Besides this, sand and granite quarrying also is an important activity which is causing a lot of damage to the ecosystem. Then there were a lot of monoculture plantations raised all along the Western Ghats, particularly in the grassland portion of the Shola grassland ecosystems, the high ranges. And these monoculture plantations have adversely impacted the biodiversity of the area. And this is a source of concern. Then the high human activity in the hills. This by way of construction. All over the Western Ghats, there's a huge rush for land. There's massive construction activity going on and unsustained agriculture. Instead of following contours, a lot of planting of crops is done along the slopes because the crops which are raised, like for example, potato, it requires well-drained soils. It cannot tolerate waterlogging. So you, instead of putting it along the contours, they put it in the slopes so that the water drains off and the crop can be raised. But this is a very unsustained agriculture because a lot of runoff happens of the loosened soil, particularly during the rains. So we are losing a lot of topsoil from these areas, which are coming down to the plains and clogging all the water bodies and causing other problems. Then there is a huge problem from this, like they mentioned, of the rains and floods in Kerala, 2017 and 18 floods. Now, this type of floods will be a recurring feature in the coming years too, because of the huge activity in the hills. Whereas earlier, like I said, like sponge water used to be held. Now that water is coming off as a runoff at a fast pace immediately after the rain. Instead of being held by the root systems of the trees and plants, it is coming down immediately. It is not that we have had unusual rains. There may have been a few instances of very heavy rainfall, but the Western Ghats has a buffer of holding all this rainwater too. But our activity, lot of construction, lot of blocking of the natural drainage lines, the channels, clogging, and putting barriers across this by way of structures have all blocked the smooth flow of the drainage lines, which is ensuring that there is unnatural buildup of moisture in the hills, which is causing landslips, causing havoc to the plains down. And besides this, there are two other smaller issues. One is the livestock grazing. There's a huge number of livestock which is available in the hills now, which is adversely affecting the natural regeneration of all the species. And we also have the corresponding man-human conflict. Like I mentioned, there are a large number of PAs in this area. This area is rich in biodiversity, rich in animal life, and there is a large volume of interaction of human wildlife adversely to both. There are a lot of human deaths happening and a lot of animal deaths happening. Now, these are the threats. So, in order to take a holistic view and to preserve this whole ecosystem, like it was mentioned again in the inaugural session, there was a Gadgil committee which was constituted in 2010, which gave its report in 2011. Now, Gadgil committee's main findings, if I just mentioned, they zonated the whole Western Ghats into 4 zones. The zone 1 was supposed to be area of to be accorded highest protection. Zone 2 would be intermediate protection. Zone 3 would be moderate protection. And zone 4 were all the PAs, as the protected areas and that means sanctuaries and national parks. That was zone 4. So the issue was less in zone 4 because they are already accorded natural protection. Whereas zone 1, 2, and 3 required various degrees of protection, starting from very rigid implementation of rules and regulations to slightly a toned down version of these rules. And zone 1 would be areas which are highly prone to erosion, highly prone to landslips. The geology is such which need to be under proper vegetative cover, a permanent vegetative cover. Now, this concept was, of course, not agreed upon by the states because of it adversely affected large, interests. Mining could not take place in zone 1 areas. Then several of the other activities, you cannot have even hydroelectric projects coming up in zone 1 areas. So the varied zonation. But even if we don't agree to this concept, there was another committee constituted, Kasturi Rangan committee, to study Gadgil committee report. So it has got stuck in these various, academic and administrative bureaucrats. So it is not found, it has not yet been implemented. But whether it is implemented or not, we need to give a serious thought to ensuring that there is some degree of regulation which comes in the hills. These hills cannot take this kind of a huge onslaught of human activity. There have to be definitely restrictions coming in. Certain areas will have to be closed for mining. Unfortunately, what happens is, particularly bauxite. Bauxite can't be mined by deep mining. There are some places where you can go under and mine, like gold and all the other minerals are mined by having shafts and going under. Whereas bauxite is a surface mineral. So it can be only mined by way of open cast mining. You have to open up an area, which means all the surface vegetation is removed. So some areas will definitely have to be blocked off. Certain areas have to be restricted for mining activities. All the governments in most of the states have taken steps to now reverse back the monoculture plantations, mostly of eucalyptus and wattle. And now they're trying to bring back the original vegetation which was available in those areas. Now, these vegetations were mostly, if we take Nilgiris, we take Idukki, higher elevations of Idukki, Munnar, Karnataka, the higher elevations in Chikmagalur and Bangalore districts. So these Hassan districts. So these areas had only grasslands as the apex forest type with pockets of sholas. Now the trees will be removed here and the grassland ecosystem will be restored back. This is the plan, but it is easier said than done because there is a huge volume of seed load which is available in the soil. And the minute you remove the trees, for several years, we'll have to continuously keep uprooting the new growth which will keep coming till we exhaust the seed bank. Now, there are various actions being taken to reverse back the monoculture plantations. That means planting only one species on large extent of land and bringing back mixed plantations of native species, so that this will act as a seed source for natural spread of the natural vegetation of that area. Then there have to be a lot of restrictions imposed on the construction activities. Certain areas, certain slopes, certain areas may have to be highly restricted, and unless this requires, of course, legislation, this requires political will, this requires legal steps, because land use is not at all restricted and regulated at the moment. And even certain slopes will have to be restricted for usage of for agriculture. Certain steeper slopes will have to encourage plantation crops rather than the vegetable and annual crops, so that at least by way of plantation crops, these are tree crops, so which will be planted at regular spacings and which ensure that there is some kind of a protection to the soil. And livestock grazing, there has to be certain checks. We'll have to go in for slightly modified ways of livestock rearing. That means mostly stall feeding. So the breeds have to be developed which are suitable for stall feeding, not open range grazing. So large volumes of regeneration is getting affected. Now, if the grazing is controlled, there is good rootstock available in these forests, these areas, where it will regenerate on its own. Fortunately for us, the Western Ghats receives good amount of rainfall. And because of this, if there is a natural protection accorded to the areas, there is a good possibility of regeneration of species coming up on their own. But it requires certain areas to be closed for certain human activities. Now, if we do all these steps, then Western Ghats, where, particularly for a state like Kerala, where except for a narrow strip of coastal area, rest all falls in the acute western zone region. And any activity of the hills, what happens in Idukki will affect Kochi. What happens in Wayanad will affect Malappuram and the plains below. So we need to definitely take measures to protect the hills so that in the larger interests, the plains are also safeguarded by a sustained water flow availability, preventing adverse rainfall conditions. And with the climate change happening more and more, its impacts will be, these unusual weather patterns will be coming. We'll have unseasonal rains. We'll have times when there'll be a huge volume of rainfall falling in a very short period, which are called cloudbursts. Now, this brings a huge volume of water in a small portion of land, and all this water runs off down to the plains and flooding those regions. So it need not rain down there in the plains. These rains in the hills can cause havoc. So we need to take special efforts to conserve the hills. Hills have to be kept as much vegetated as possible so that they mitigate the main effects of climate change and rainfall pattern changes, and serve their purpose, like I mentioned earlier, give a sustained source. These are valuable sources of genetic resources. So a lot of our food crop genes are also locked in the hills by way of the wild crops. So which will have disease resistance, pest resistance. All these varieties are developed by taking genes from the wild crop. Now these wild crops have to survive. They have to be sustained and maintained in the hills. If all these measures are taken, we will go a very long way in safeguarding, that the benefits accrue to our future generations, which was part of the 1972 theme of the United Nations Conference. So we safeguard the hills not only for ourselves, but also for the future generations. And like I said, we have only one earth on which we all live, whether we like it or not. And there is nowhere else for us to go. So we need to safeguard whatever we have for as long as possible. Thank you. This is what I wanted to say.